Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. Today we're tackling something we all deal with constantly. That inner voice. You know, the one that never shuts up, doubts your choices, replays old mistakes, or just keeps you up at night. Ring any bells?
Oh, you mean the voice that helpfully reminds me of that incredibly embarrassing thing I did back in college? Yeah, I know it well. So Autumn, let me guess. This is going to be one of those think positive and all your problems will disappear kind of episodes, right?
Not at all, Rachel. We're actually diving into Ethan Kross's book, Chatter. It breaks down how that inner voice isn't just random noise. It's actually really powerful. It can either tank your mental health or help you really thrive, depending on how you handle it. This is based on solid science, and it's full of strategies way beyond just saying positive affirmations.
Okay, color me intrigued. So what's the game plan here? How deep are we going into the overthinking abyss that is my brain?
We're hitting 3 key areas. First, how self-talk can be both a gift and a curse. The trick is all in how you frame it. Really. Then we're sharing some practical, science-backed ways to stop that harmful chatter dead in its tracks. And finally, we'll explore how your environment subtly influences your mental state.
So, a journey from the mess in our minds to how our surroundings add to it. I get it. Let's see if we can transform my inner critic into a motivational speaker by the end of this.
Okay, so picking up where we left off, let's dive into the main idea here, the dual nature of self-talk. It's such a fascinating paradox, isn't it? Your inner voice can be a real lifesaver, helping you process emotions, sharpen your focus, and even shape your sense of identity. But on the flip side, it can also drag you down into a pit of overthinking, anxiety, and decision paralysis.
Right, so basically, it's a 50-50 chance every morning. Will my internal monologue be my cheerleader? Or will it spend the day listing all my flaws? Sounds a bit risky, doesn't it? Is there an off switch somewhere?
Afraid not. No off switch, Rachel. But trust me, even with its downsides, the good side of self-talk is definitely worth it. Take focus, for example. It's your inner voice that gives you mental clarity during those high-pressure moments. Think about athletes. Studies have shown that athletes who use self-directed, task-focused dialogue, like telling themselves, 1 point at a time in tennis, actually perform better. It keeps them laser-focused, blocks out distractions, and really boosts their confidence.
So it's like having a coach in your head constantly shouting advice from the sidelines? But couldn't that get a little overwhelming?
Not if you learn how to control it. It's about shifting your self-talk from reactive to deliberate. And it's not just for sports either. Imagine you're preparing for a big presentation, repeating key points or psyching yourself up with, "I've got this." That little mental rehearsal can bridge the gap between anxiety and actually delivering the presentation.
I get it. But what happens when that same voice turns on you halfway through your presentation? Suddenly, it's not, "I've got this," but, "Oh no, I'm sweating, everyone can tell, this is a disaster."
That's the other side of the coin, the dark side of self-talk. And we'll definitely get into that whole spiral of overthinking in a bit. But first, I want to point out that self-talk isn't just about staying present. It also helps you make sense of what's happening, especially when things get tough.
So you're saying it helps you talk yourself off the ledge?
Kind of, yeah. Think about how we naturally reflect on setbacks. Say a student completely bombs an exam. At first, their inner voice might be super critical. "I'm just not good enough." But if they can reframe it like, "Okay, this is one test, it's not the end of the world. What can I do differently next time?" That's the kind of self-talk that fosters growth and resilience.
I love the optimism, Autumn. Isn't that like step 1? Because your first reaction is usually not reframing. It's probably more like venting or just generally brooding, right?
True. Venting, if you don't keep it in check, can easily trap you in a cycle of helplessness. But deliberate self-talk can break that loop. Take someone like Barack Obama. He's well known for asking himself during crises, am I doing the right thing based on my values? That's next-level self-talk. Using your inner voice to hold yourself accountable to a bigger picture.
Okay, fair enough. So self-talk can ground you or redirect your mindset in the moment. Got it. But what about the long term? Does it actually shift how you see yourself day to day, Nate?
Absolutely. In fact, self-talk plays a huge role in shaping your personal identity. If you consistently tell yourself, I'm capable, or I can handle challenges, those statements stop being just words. They become part of how you actually see yourself.
So fake it till you make it, but just for your internal monologue?
More like repeat it until you believe it. Psychologists often compare it to building a scaffolding of self-perception. Over time, those affirming inner dialogues become the stories you live by, shaping the confidence you project.
Sounds empowering. Or terrifying, depending on what stories you've been telling yourself for years, huh?
Exactly. And that brings us to the risks of negative self-talk. When self-talk turns into that incessant chatter, that constant loop of criticism, it feeds things like overthinking, anxiety, and let's just say, it's not great for making decisions either.
Oh, let's talk about overthinking. Picture this. You're prepping for, say, a team presentation. And that voice starts whispering, what if you forget all the key points? What if they think you're clueless? How does that snowball into complete mental chaos?
It's all about the power of compounding doubt. Once you let that what-if spiral begin, there's no stopping it at just one question. Suddenly, your inner voice is replaying every single worst-case scenario. Dan Harris, the journalist, actually had a public panic attack on live TV, and he's talked about how his inner chatter amplified his fears afterward. Things like, everyone saw me fail, which just completely snowballed.
Yikes. So this self-talk turns molehills into mountains. But it can also freeze you, right? Like how it sabotages decision-making when you're under pressure?
Totally. Let's take Rick Ankiel. He was this phenomenal pitcher until mid-playoffs. One wild pitch sent him into a spiral of negative self-talk. Everyone's watching me fall apart. That mental tailspin wrecked his focus, leading to another wild pitch, and the whole situation just unraveled from there.
And let me guess, once that inner voice starts blaming you for every tiny misstep, it just feeds on itself?
Exactly. That loop of negativity doesn't just affect your performance. It clouds your judgment and leads to real fear-driven choices. It's a slippery slope from simple doubt to full-on self-sabotage.
Okay, so negative self-talk trashes your mental clarity. But it seems like it also isolates you emotionally.
That's the paradox, isn't it? Excessive venting of those relentless thoughts often makes people pull away. There was this woman, Laura, in a study. Her worry spiraled into obsessive loops, and she was constantly venting to her friends. But instead of feeling supported, she just ended up draining those relationships. So that inner chatter doesn't just live inside your head. It pushes people away too.
So, when does your inner voice actually help you connect then? Because this sounds like a PR disaster for the human mind.
That's where that balance comes in. Acknowledging the dual nature of self-talk. Recognizing that chatter for what it is, and actively reframing. Creating distance. Even advising yourself as if you're helping a friend. It's all about turning your inner dialogue into a real tool for clarity and growth, and not a weapon you use against yourself. So, after diving into the dual nature of self-talk, let's talk about the really disruptive side of unchecked chatter. That constant loop of negativity can easily turn into full-blown overthinking, basically hijacking your emotions, decisions, and even your relationships. And that's where Ethan Kross's strategies come in. Techniques to manage chatter isn't just about pointing out the problem. It's about offering actionable solutions to quiet that inner critic. We're talking psychological distancing, reframing experiences, and of course, the essential role social connections plays in turning the tide. Let's break down these concepts into really practical tools for real-life challenges.
Okay, finally, something practical we can sink our teeth into. So are we starting with this distance yourself from the chaos idea? I gotta say, it sounds a little Zen master sitting on a mountaintop-ish to me.
I get that, but it's actually pretty grounded in neuroscience. Psychological distancing is really about stepping back mentally, creating a bit of space between you and your emotions, so you can actually think more clearly. And it's surprisingly accessible. Take third-person self-talk, for example. Instead of saying, "Why am I such a mess?" you could say, "Why is Rachel feeling this way?" And "What can he do about it?"
Whoa, hold on. Talking to myself in the third person, that sounds like one step away from rewriting all my emails as, "Rachel thinks we should circle back on this."
Okay, I get that it sounds a bit odd, but here's the science behind it. Third-person self-talk actually activates brain regions that are tied to emotional control. There was a study that showed that when people use their name or he, she instead of I, their distress levels actually dipped significantly. It's kind of like looking at your problem through a window, instead of being stuck right there in the middle of the room.
So, you're telling me that pronouns could actually save my mental health? Who knew grammar could be this powerful?
Absolutely. Kross also recommends temporal distancing, imagining how a problem will feel in the long run. Picture yourself, say, 5 years from now. Is today's deadline panic really going to even matter?
You know, that's actually a really good point. I mean, 5 years ago, I was stressing out over some project or other that now sounds completely trivial. It's almost embarrassing how big it felt at that moment.
Exactly. Temporal distancing actually shifts your brain from survival mode to a broader perspective, and that calms down those fight-or-flight instincts. And for those who find visualizing the future tough, there's always reflective writing, like journaling, to untangle your thoughts and process emotions.
Journaling, huh? Sounds very therapeutic, but what exactly is the logic behind it? Because I've tried writing things down before, and it usually just turns into a rant session.
Yeah, that's actually part of the process, believe it or not. When you turn your emotions into written words, it forces you to structure them. Your brain has to organize those scattered thoughts, and that makes them feel less overwhelming. Over time, it's like decluttering a really messy room in your head.
Okay, but how do we actually go from ranting to, well, fixing the mess? I mean, doesn't writing just dump everything out without actually solving the problem?
Great question. The key here is to reflect as if you're a third-party observer. For example, Kross shares the story of Tracy, a Harvard student who was overwhelmed by imposter syndrome. She started journaling, but instead of just wallowing in "I'm failing at life," she actually reframed her entries. She'd write as though she was coaching herself. What's really going on here? How would someone else see this challenge? That shift actually helped her see herself with a lot more compassion and a lot more clarity.
So step 1, rant. Step 2, pretend you're giving advice to someone else. Got it. So what's next? Turning that advice into action, I presume?
Exactly. Which leads us to reframing these experiences. This technique is all about changing the language you use to interpret a situation. Say you're dealing with something nerve-wracking, like giving a big speech. Instead of viewing the stress as a threat, like, "What if I totally bomb this?" you reframe it as an opportunity. This is my shot to grow. It's a subtle shift, but studies actually show it can flip your body's stress response from harmful to motivating.
I'll admit, I have heard the whole stress is a growth opportunity mantra before. So, is there a fresh angle here, or is it just positive thinking with a new name?
Good point. It's deeper than just think positive. Reframing isn't about ignoring stress. It's about reinterpreting it. Ethan Kross highlights Fred Rogers, yes, Mr. Rogers, as a prime example. He struggled with self-doubt while he was writing scripts after a long hiatus. But instead of spiraling, he actually reframed his fears in the third person. Fred, you've tackled challenges before. That self-compassion and perspective actually turned his doubt into momentum.
Mr. Rogers talking himself up in the third person? Okay, that's surprisingly comforting. If it worked for him, I might actually rethink this whole reframing for my next panic spiral.
Well, it's worth a try. And reframing isn't just for adults. Kids can benefit too. Ever heard of the Batman effect? It's this experiment where children approached a boring task as if they were Batman. So, when they thought of themselves as this calm, capable superhero, their persistence actually skyrocketed. It's a very powerful reminder that perspective, real or even imagined, can reshape how we tackle challenges.
So, kids tap into Batman. Adults can channel Mr. Rogers. I'm actually liking this cast of mental role models. But what about when the challenge isn't just stressful? It's emotionally crushing, like grief. Can you really reframe something that heavy?
You can, yeah, though it definitely takes some practice and guidance. Kross cites examples of children navigating parental loss through reframing exercises. Instead of focusing solely on their pain, they anchored themselves in gratitude. One child said, "Dad loved me and made me laugh. I'll hold on to those memories." It's about finding meaning and strength amidst the loss.
I can see why reframing resonates. It's not dismissing pain, but softening its edges, I guess. That being said, I'm assuming that social support somehow ties into all this. I mean, you can't really manage tough emotions purely on self-talk, right?
Absolutely. Relationships are truly a huge piece of this puzzle, especially when it comes to chatter. But here's a twist. Not all support has to be direct. Kross introduces this idea of invisible support, which helps people without overwhelming them or making them feel dependent.
Invisible support? As in helping someone without them even realizing it? That sounds a little sneaky.
It's more subtle than sneaky, I promise. Say your friend's drowning in stress. Instead of making a big deal out of it, you quietly send over dinner or offer to babysit their kids. No fanfare, just help. Research actually shows that this kind of support keeps people from feeling burdened by gratitude or guilt, which more direct interventions sometimes provoke.
Okay, that actually sounds brilliant and low maintenance. But what about situations where people need a more direct boost? Like inspiration, for example.
Well, that's where role models come into play, whether they're real or fictional. When you adopt their mindset by asking yourself, what would this person do? It can help you distance yourself from the problem while borrowing their confidence. Kids playing superhero is one example, but adults can certainly use this too. Think about people under pressure channeling leadership traits from someone they really admire.
So in a way, you're saying role models offer portable resilience. You kind of carry their approaches with you for when you can't really trust your own. That's actually pretty genius.
It really is. Whether it's through distancing, reframing, or just plain support, the goal is always the same: to turn that chatter from a liability into a real asset. Now that we've explored some techniques for managing chatter, let's dive into how our surroundings influence those internal dialogues. This is all about understanding how external factors interact with what's going on in our heads, offering a more complete picture of how to achieve mental clarity. And what better place to start than with something most of us are probably craving: nature.
Ah, yes, the famous escape to nature, where we supposedly ditch our screens and stress. But can a simple walk in the park really quiet down that inner voice, or at least turn down the volume?
In many ways, yes, it can. That's where the attention restoration theory, or ART, comes in. It suggests that spending time in nature replenishes our cognitive resources and reduces stress. It's not so much about completely silencing your inner voice, but more about giving it the space to recalibrate. Studies, like one in England, have shown that people living near green spaces report mental health benefits comparable to feeling 5 years younger or getting a $10,000 raise.
So living next to a park is like aging backwards for your brain or hitting the mental lottery. That's a pretty compelling reason to consider planting a tree or two.
Precisely. And here's the good news. Even if you can't live right next to nature, just looking at images or videos of it can create similar restorative effects. Nature creates what's called soft fascination, drawing your attention gently to soothing stimuli like rustling leaves or waves, without the intense focus needed for, say, navigating honking cars or crowded sidewalks.
So it's like a spa day for your brain, minus the cucumber slices? Sounds good. Although I admit I've never felt particularly zen trying to avoid squirrels or tree roots when I am hiking.
That's where personal choice comes in. The main thing to remember is this. Nature helps reduce chatter by allowing your mind to wander without feeling overwhelmed. And if a full-blown nature escape isn't doable, even small things like keeping potted plants or watching nature videos can be surprisingly effective.
Okay, so nature's got the relaxation thing covered. What about those of us who aren't ready to hug a tree? Does our immediate indoor environment matter just as much?
Absolutely. Let's talk about the stabilizing power of an organized space. Think about Rafael Nadal's courtside habits, like perfectly aligning his water bottles. These routines illustrate a concept called compensatory control, creating order externally to manage internal chaos.
So, organizing my desk during a meltdown isn't just procrastination. Okay, Nadal might be onto something here.
He is. Organized spaces can create a feeling of predictability and control, which can be extremely valuable when you're feeling mentally scattered. Research shows that decluttering reduces anxiety and improves focus. That's why things like making your bed or tidying your workspace can turn overwhelming inner dialogues into manageable thoughts.
So routines, whether it's full-on minimalism a la Marie Kondo or Nadal's water bottle feng shui, offer emotional grounding. I can see how that could help. Still, I'm not sure a ritual will do the trick when, say, you're in the middle of an existential crisis, right? What about environments that offer something bigger than a clean desk?
That's where awe comes in. Think about those moments when the sheer scale of something, a sunset, a canyon, a cityscape, left you speechless. Awe can actually shrink the self. It temporarily pulls you out of that self-preoccupation, making personal anxieties seem less suffocating.
Let me guess. The neuroscience explanation here involves some kind of brain chemicals, right?
Spot on. Experiences of awe activate reward pathways in the brain, releasing oxytocin and endorphins. These neurotransmitters increase feelings of connection and calm, helping to quiet that mental chatter. Ming-Kuo's research even shows how awe-inducing settings, like gardens or green spaces in low-income areas, can foster emotional resilience. It really can be life-changing.
Let's really focus on the idea of shrinking the self. Are you saying standing in front of a gigantic waterfall might make my endless to-do list seem less crucial?
Precisely. It's about gaining perspective. Awe shifts the focus from me and all my problems to wow, look how interconnected everything truly is. Experiencing things like the aurora borealis or a powerful orchestra can quiet inner anxieties for a moment and help people reframe their problems.
Okay, But not all of us live near waterfalls or regularly attend symphonies. How do the rest of us get our daily dose of awe?
Well, awe is actually surprisingly accessible. It can stem from ordinary moments too. A starry night, a community coming together, or even small acts of kindness. And believe it or not, studies show that social touch, like a comforting hand on the shoulder, can mimic some of awe's effects by easing distress and fostering a sense of connection.
So, I can trade breathtaking canyons for a comforting hug? Convenient. Though what if that support isn't accessible?
Even symbolic connections are helpful. One study found that holding something warm, like a cup of tea, or even just cuddling a teddy bear, can create a sense of grounding during emotionally challenging moments. It's the human need for connection in a nutshell.
Or nature organization, all good. So it sounds like the right environment isn't just a backdrop for our lives. It's actively influencing what's happening inside our heads.
Exactly. Whether it's the tranquility of nature, the structure of order, or the perspective of awe, these external factors directly interact with the stories that your inner voice is telling. Okay, so today we really dove into the power, but also the dangers of self-talk. That inner voice we all have, it's like a double-edged sword. It can totally help us tackle tough stuff with focus and bounce back. Or, it can just trap us in this endless loop of negative thoughts. The trick is to get that it does both, and then learn how to change the story when it starts going south.
Right? And we didn't just leave you hanging. We gave you some pretty practical tools. Psychological distancing, for example, to kind of step back from the drama. Reframing, to take the edge off stressful situations. And then there's this clever idea of invisible support. Oh, and don't forget how your surroundings can affect you, or nature. Even just a tidy workspace can really calm that mental chatter.
Exactly. So the main takeaway here is that your inner voice doesn't have to call all the shots. You can grab the reins. This week, challenge yourself to try just one of these techniques. Maybe try talking to yourself in the third person, or just take a quick break to appreciate something amazing. See what happens. Honestly, once you figure out how to work with your inner dialogue, instead of against it, the sky's the limit in terms of clarity and personal growth.
So go on, take that walk in the park. Tidy up that desk that's been bugging you. Or, channel your inner Batman for a bit of psychological distance. Just remember, that voice in your head? It's powerful. So it's up to you to decide how to use it.